real pleasure to be here. They said maybe I could shorten this thing up a bit, so if you have no further questions, we'll go to break. But we're going to make it quite a bit shorter than it was. We're going to be talking about advocacy. What in the world is advocacy? Before we get into that, I want to go through a term that you're seeing up on the screen now, language service companies. I think all of you have been, like we in the United States, have been indoctrinated that we are language service providers. In the United States, that has become an enormous problem for us, being a provider. They therefore accuse us of having our freelance interpreters be employees, since we're providing the services. So we've made a very clear distinction in the United States to call ourselves language service companies. And that's what we're doing. What is advocacy? It's a political process by an individual or a large group aimed at influencing public policy and resource allocation decisions within public economic and social systems and institutions. That's the dictionary definition of what advocacy is all about. Well, what does it mean to language service companies? We can advocate a couple of different ways. We can hire a lobbyist. That's always a good idea. Or you can do it yourself. Let's talk about lobbyists. The thing about lobbyists is they really understand the political system within which you are working. They know the politicians, they know the people who make decisions, and they have connections with the politicians that you probably don't have. On the other hand, you can help yourself by talking about your business. There's nobody that understands your business better than you do. Players in the language service industry are language service companies, first and foremost. That's us. That's who we are. There are language service organizations. Let's talk about that for a second. Language service organizations are also clients of our services. But in many cases, like in, for instance, the federal government, and we'll talk about that later, they have language service organizations within a department where they actually train interpreters and translators, use them, and don't go to a language service company. And finally, there's the language service specialists, the linguists, the interpreters, the translators, the teachers. Those are the people who know how to do the job of linguistics and do it very, very well. And that's who we are using. And then finally, the clients, the person who's paying the bill, the user of the services. There are two ways that language services are delivered. The first way is a language service company. That's you. The second is the language specialist, the linguist. And finally, the client. That's one way to deliver services. The other way is the language service organization, which is inside one of the departments or divisions or whatever of a company. Direct to the language specialist, direct to the client. Let me ask some questions here, because this is always give and take. Nothing is ever formal with me. But in this particular case, the language service organization would like to have the language specialist, the interpreter, the translator, or the teacher, and go directly to them back as the clients. In example, who would be Secretary of State of the United States, Department of State, has a huge number of translators and interpreters. They have probably 1,500 contract interpreters that they're using on a regular basis. They don't go to a language service organization, a language service company. They go directly to their interpreters and bypass language service companies. So therefore, in that kind of a scenario, you're not in the picture. That's why we advocate. We need to tell government why it's important for us to be in the business. The language service company is a very important part of providing the services. Even though they're not providing services through language service companies, they need to be told how important it is that we are a strong, vital industry. Because if we don't do that, they'll try to cut us out and go directly to the interpreter, translator, or teacher. That would be a preferable model because they think it's going to be cheaper. Well, it isn't. We determine what the language skills are that is needed in an encounter. We determine what the linguist skills are that are going to be needed for that encounter. We decided what the level of the technical terms is for that particular encounter. Those are the things that we do that adds to the value of our work. This is the thing that the client needs to know most, that we do and are very proficient at doing client needs analysis. That is, getting in and finding out what exactly does the client need. How many times have you had an RFP that says, oh, well, we need to have certified interpreters. We need to have certified translators. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. And it's for us to determine that whether they need that or not. And this is the reason we get paid more than the linguist gets paid, because we provide value to our end user by doing these services. As I said before, many times our clients become their own language service organizations. We see that time and time again and again. But they also said, you know what? You're needed, because there are many times that we can't fill an assignment and we need to go out to a language service company. Well, you know, and federal courts have told me this, Central Intelligence Agency has told me this, Department of State has told me this, that they go to language service companies. And if you don't have a strong group of language service companies, then you're not going to be able to fill the needs of the interpretation or translation or teaching. Each agency uses language service companies to fill needs that they can't. That's a given. And what we do in advocacy is we go into those organizations and we educate them on that fact, that they've got to have us and they've got to have a healthy us in order for languages to do well. And don't kid yourself, language is extremely important throughout the world. Interpreters are in use every day in many, many settings. And it's through us that we get to deliver those services. Through us is how it works best. And that's why you're out there in the field talking to your customers, your clients, and try to convince the interpreters and translators who are always trying to get the work directly without going through us, that it just simply doesn't work very well. If language service companies are limited to just sporadic work, they're not strong enough to provide services, whether they have language service organizations within a client or not. So it's in everybody's best interest to support and promote. And that's what you do here at ELIA, and that's what we do at Association of Language Companies, is we promote the use of language service companies. I don't care what sector you're in, that's the job that you have to do as company owners, is convince the people who use your services that you have to have a strong language service company in order for languages to work within their country, within their county, within their state, wherever it happens to be. And we're working right now with the federal courts, with the Department of State, with Central Intelligence Agency, with the FBI in the United States, to convince them that they have to support us or they're going to have continuing problems. And they have already acknowledged that there are some problems. So we believe that this is an untapped market in the United States. I don't know about Europe. I'm hoping it's the same way here, that there are language service organizations that could in fact support language service companies and get more business to you. If that happens, then you're going to grow as we are going to continue to grow. We've seen in the last few months possibly billions of dollars of language services within the United States through government. And we're hoping to tap that market through advocacy. There are other needs for advocacy. Let's talk about that, besides just advocating for the fact that we'd have to have strong language service companies. We have an issue in the United States called independent contractors versus employees. State governments within the United States are really, really hurting for revenue. I would imagine it's the same way here. One of the things that they're trying to do in the United States is to say, oh, well, the people that you work with should be employees, not independent contractors. And that way, you then, in the United States, you withhold taxes for an employee, submit those taxes to the taxing agency, and they know they're going to get paid. They don't think they're going to get paid if we're using independent contractors. They don't really realize that they're still going to get paid through the independent contractor, but it gets very, very confusing because they say, we need to have more revenue, and we think this is one way to do it, using employees rather than having independent contractors. We are vigorously fighting that issue on a daily basis. We have started a website in the United States called Center for, what is CIIC? Contract Interpreter Information Center. And it's a website that we established so that freelancers can go in there and say, we believe that we want to stay as independent contractors. Most freelancers are saying, we do want to be independent contractors. We don't want to be employees. So it's a fight that's ongoing, and we're working hard at it. As I said, taxing agencies need more revenue, which is why the issue is under discussion in the United States. And I would imagine that's something here too as well. Government treatment of LSCs. In the United States, we fall under Section 530 of the Internal Revenue Code called Safe Haven, which means that for the past 25 years, it's been proven in the United States that language service companies use independent contractors. And so the Internal Revenue Service in the United States has not gone forward with any policies that would impact us. But the states, again, as I said, are a continuing, ongoing problem.